So great to see all of you. You picked the best class at the conference. You're wise people. It's all because of Christie, of course, and really excited to be together. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to dive into our class a little bit. Our class is about life transitions, and of course, in this life, we are experiencing a journey. And every day really is a transition spiritually, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to look at some scriptures. And then we're going to do some Q&A that I think, that's my favorite part. And we'll have some time. So if you have any questions or issues or attitudes or whatever, Christie will fix it after a while. But anyway, my name is Jay Kelly. I am an evangelist in Seattle. And I see some of my homies here. Great to see you guys. You hear me all the time. I don't know what you're doing here, but anyway, really excited just to be with you. I became a Christian in 1984. So this December 16th is my 30th spiritual birthday. Yeah, I'm excited. And so I've been around a little while. I became a Christian as a college student in Boston. And yeah, come on, Boston. I went to Boston University. And then after I graduated, I moved here to Denver. And I served in the full-time ministry here for 5 years, and mostly in the singles and the campus ministry, a little bit of married stuff, but mostly singles and campus with my wife, Carol, who I met in the singles ministry. And then we got married here. Actually, I went day before yesterday to Cheeseman Park. That's where we got married. And I went down there and took some pictures and sent them to my wife. And so we got a couple kids, and I'll share more about that later, speaking of journeys. And we serve as co-leaders at the Seattle church now, and we're really excited to be here and to share some things with you. And so I'll introduce Christie, and she can share a little bit about herself. All right, give it up for Christie. Come on.
Good morning. My name is Christie Corral, and I'm actually part of the Denver church here. I've been a disciple for 21 years. I was converted on the campus ministry, actually across the street, 21 years ago, and I've been in the I was in the campus ministry for a month, and then I moved into the singles ministry. So I've been a single for 21 years, basically. So I'm excited to share about life transitions and just how, even for me even right now, my brother's not doing well, not expected to live, so life has transitions. You can be doing great and life happens. So I hope that I can give you some practicals today on how to navigate life emotionally, spiritually, and relationally.
Awesome, thanks. All right, turn your Bibles on. Psalm 84. All right, let's go. I actually have a paper Bible. I'm going old school. That's right. After 30 years, I like to turn pages, and I don't text and pretend I'm looking at my Bible like some people do. That's sin, right? That'd be sin. By the way, silence your phone. All right, if it's not already silenced, why don't we do that? This is more important than a movie, and we do it there. Are you there? Psalm 84? Psalm 84, yep. Verse 1. We're going to read 1 through 5. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young. A place near your altar. Lord Almighty, my King and my God, blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Amen. Verse 5. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. I'm going to make 1 point. Christie's a woman. She's going to make 3. But I'm just going to make 1. And my point is, pilgrims trust God. We're going to talk a little bit about trust. And Christie's going to share how in her life's journey, she has accumulated some really important tools as she's learned to trust God and transition from one life stage to another. And we talked about it, and her kind of tool set falls into 3 categories. She has learned some incredible skills relationally, spiritually, and emotionally. So she's going to share kind of some things she's learned in different trials and experiences she's had as a Christian. And hopefully I'm going to help you just have this conviction that we are pilgrims. This world is not our home. And I'll tell you, it messes us up spiritually when we try to make it our home. When we start thinking, you know what? My life is all about, my purpose in life is my personal happiness. Heidi, you're here. It's so great to see you. When we start thinking that my life here is all about my personal fulfillment, my happiness, my joy, my comfort, if we try to make this world our home, you know what? It just doesn't work. And we get really frustrated. I was a young Christian once, and young Christians are dumb. Right? Okay, who's been a Christian less than 5 years? Okay, you're totally stupid, right? And that's awesome. I mean, it's great to be an idealist. I'm teasing, I do that. I can't help myself. But, you know, young Christians come up out of the baptistry, they grab a towel, and they just expect life to be perfect, right? Everyone is going to be so righteous and so loving. I'm going to have these awesome roommates now. I'm going to go on a date every weekend, and he's going to open the door for me and buy everything, and he's going to sweep me off my feet, and then I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have kids, and having kids will be a good thing. If I knew what I know now, I would have never had children, and I am not kidding. But I'll share more about that later. I'm happy I have them, and this is being recorded, not that they'll listen, but anyway, this world is not my home, and it took me a few years of frustration before I finally gave up on trying to make this world my home. This world being the source of my happiness, my security, my comfort, and my joy. And it took me, I was a young, dumb Christian for a while. I graduated from college in Boston University, and I wanted to go on the mission team. I had this, when you're a young Christian, you're dumb, and you think, like, I'm gonna go do, God's gonna use me in these fantastic ways, and I signed up for every mission team in every third world country. I have a degree in third world development, and I thought, I could make a difference in some third world country. And I kept getting kicked off these mission teams. And I couldn't figure out why, and I struggled with it. I'd sign up to go, and I told my parents, I'm moving to South America, and I'm moving to China, and it just never really worked out. And I kind of got frustrated with that. Often it was because I was white, which is, please, I'm too white. You kidding me? Isn't that sin for them to be prejudiced against me for being white? But they had too many white people on these mission teams to different places that I wanted to go, and so I never got to go. And then Preston Shepard said, we need a mission team to go to Denver. And I was like, I don't want to go to Denver. That's not my dream. I have a degree in third world development. Last time I checked, Denver was still first world. I mean, they wear cowboy hats, and it's a little scary out there with the horses and all. I grew up in New York, and so Denver, come on now. So Denver kind of scared me. If you're from New York, anything sort of west is a little bit scary. But I moved here anyway, not really knowing what God had in store, but He had a great life plan for me. It wasn't my plan, it wasn't my life, and it wasn't how I saw things playing out. And yet, God had it all worked out. His dreams, not mine. And when I got here, I told Preston Shepard, well, in Boston, I told Preston, I'll go with you, but I've got a couple conditions. Because this is my home, and I got this life worked out for me. I said, I'll move there as long as I can be in the campus ministry, be in the full-time ministry, and be discipled by you. And he said, we'll see. Which I heard as, yes. So I moved out here, got myself an apartment on, I think it's called Green Mountain. Is there a place called Green Mountain? Okay. I lived on Green Mountain, which that sounded scary to me coming from New York. And then I got my first staff meeting, I told Preston, you remember our deal, right? And he said, no campus ministry, there's no job here for you, and Larry Craig's discipling you. And I was like, wait a minute, I moved halfway across the country with my conditions, and he said, no, get a job, get in the singles, and go meet your new discipler, Larry Craig, who turns out to be way better than Preston anyway, but I didn't know that at the time, and I was struggling with, can I really trust God? Can I trust God? And I know that pilgrims trust God, but I didn't really have my heart set on pilgrimage the way I think I do now. I'm much more surrendered spiritually than I was back then. But I was having a hard time. I was wrestling with disappointment, pain. I was trying to control. I had my life scripted out, and when it went off script, I struggled spiritually. And I know that I see your heads nodding. I know you can relate to that, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. But I'm gonna let Christie share a little bit before I go further.
So just spiritually, I am one of those people actually that loves change, ironically, because I think it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you trusting God, as Jay said. It keeps you relying not on yourself. As I said, I've been a Christian for 21 years. So I've moved from, I wasn't in the campus very long, but campus to singles. I've been in every region of the Denver church. So I guess that's 4 or 5, whatever it is. And so every time, and then I've had the situations, I think some of the things that were key for me is when I studied the Bible with someone who ended up discipling me. And you have to choose to be humble and choose to be vulnerable. And I had to choose, am I going to learn something from this person? I think she was 6 months old as a Christian. And, as Jay said, different people have different vision for you. And at that time I was told, she's fit for the ministry, so that's why she's going to disciple you. And so I just had to really make a choice. And I think transition is about choices. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to be loving. You can choose to learn. And I think I chose the path of learning. I humbled myself, and I believe that God puts anybody in your life for any reason, no matter what. So.
Okay, so after you've been a Christian for a few years, you start asking yourself a couple questions. It's actually the same question, but it depends on the emphasis. The first question is, can you trust God? Can you trust God? And the second question is, can you trust God? And let me explain what I mean by that. Can you trust God the question really is he dependable? Is he trustworthy? If I lean on him, will he be there for me? If I cling to him, am I going to fall or will I stand? Will I heal or will I stay wounded? And I remember after a few years, I thought when I became a Christian, everything from my past was going to be erased. And I had a lot that I really, really wanted to be erased. And some of that was struggles with same-sex attraction and abuse that happened to me when I was little. And I thought, when I got baptized, that all is going to go away. And it wasn't really until I got married that I realized it didn't go away. And I was struggling with things from abuse from my childhood, and it was really, really difficult for me to sort that out. And my wife and I had to work through some stuff to figure out, where am I at with these sinful tendencies from the past? Then we had a couple kids, and they're really cute when they're little. It's really, actually the first couple years, not so much. But once they start using the toilet, it's really great. But then they go through puberty, and it's just horrible. I'm sort of teasing, but my kids got baptized when we did the whole thing. We're like sold out Kingdom disciples. I did every family night Devo known to man, right? I was basically the perfect father. And my wife's the perfect mother, and we did everything totally right. And our kid, we were like, we were just like the kingdom family, and kids went through the teen ministry and got baptized when they were supposed to. You know, they were 16. It was just like the perfect whatever. And then they were in the teen ministry for a little while. And then when it was time to transition to campus ministry, it turned out they really weren't Christians after all. And our daughter, our older daughter, Paige, basically told me, I've been not living the life of a Christian for a while, and I'm not going to be a Christian anymore. And, you know, we're in the full-time ministry, and our kids, so she decides to fall away. And it wasn't like, you know, I'm going to go to the Presbyterian church now. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to, it's not that kind of fall away. It's like, follow my ambulance to the hospital kind of fall away. It's the police knocking at our door at 3 a.m. kind of fall away. So I had to ask myself, can I trust God when I feel like the rug's been totally pulled out from under my feet? And then the other question is, can I trust God? Like, am I really willing to go there? Am I willing to commit to that? And so my kids, she wouldn't mind me sharing that after dropping out of college, my daughter went into a rehab program for addiction. And she was really struggling. And I was so mad at her. I was mad at God. I was mad at Ron Brumley. I felt like he lied to me. He told me if I had family devos, if I took my daughter on a date, if I told her she was beautiful, if we prayed in the mornings and prayed over our meals, if we were faithful Christians, if I did A, B, C, and D, I was going to get E, F, and G as an outcome. And it's a lie, but I believed it. And I was mad, and I told Ron that. I'm like, Ron, you lied to me. I love you, but you lied to me. You got the perfect family, and I got this jacked up mess. And I'm mad. I'm mad at God. I'm mad at you. I'm mad at my kids. And talk about learning to trust God. It was incredibly challenging. I couldn't get out of bed. And I don't want this to be all about my story, but I want you to know I have been in situations where I've had to learn to trust God. And that I can trust Him. And that I can trust Him. And so I didn't get out of bed for a while. I didn't know if I was going to still have my job when I finally got out of bed. And so I just slept a lot. And I didn't eat much. I lost my appetite, and I lost 29 pounds. I'm not that big of a guy. So you should have seen me. Remember that, Heidi? Heidi was like, she thought I was really sick, like I had some kind of illness. And I'm like, no, it's just children. I have children that don't love God anymore, and so I sleep and I don't eat. My wife had the opposite problem. She couldn't sleep and she ate too much. She'd be up all night eating, and I'd be like, I wouldn't get out of bed for days. But we both had to really wrestle with our kids have turned their backs on everything that we believe in. And I'm not okay with it. And I got to figure this out. And I really thought that when I became a Christian, I was going to have this certain kind of life. And it's not happening. And I've got to ask myself, can I trust God, and can I trust God? Hebrews chapter 12. And then on top of it, though, I grew up, my parents are non-believers in every way. Some of you guys grew up in like churchy, religious households where your parents were like nice and went to church sometimes. My parents kind of made fun of people like your parents. Like, I grew up in a household like, God, that's a riot. These religious people are nuts, right? So then I became a Christian. And I started going to church all the time, and my parents were very concerned. So then I graduated from college and said, I'm going to go in the full-time ministry. And they were like, you're going to do what? My grandfather said, a couple of years into the ministry, he said, are you still sponging off religious people for a living? I was like, yes, Gramp, that's what I'm doing, sponging off religious people for a living. And so that was a bit of a challenge for me. I brought that up for a reason which I will get to a little bit later. Hebrews 12, verse 4. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted the point of shedding your blood, and you have completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, "Son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, then everyone undergoes discipline. Then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we've all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed." You know, I finally got to the point where I realized that God is in control, and that the fact that God is sovereign, that he is in charge of everything that happens in this life, I believe that. I didn't always believe that, but I do now. That I believe that he is completely sovereign. And we see many examples in the Bible of him using even people's sin, even evil acts of men, for his glory and for the good of the people that love him. I believe he is completely sovereign. He is infinite in his wisdom, and he is perfect in his love. And that those things do not contradict one another. And we'll talk about that a little more, but I'm going to let Christie share first.
How many of you feel in your times of trial that God is sovereign? How many of you have had to wrestle to get to that point? Exactly. You know, when Jay was talking about being a dad, I will talk about my dad. So 10 years ago, I had to go through the death of my father. And that was probably my most challenging time in my life, because my dad was that constant. He was that stable person in my life. And it was, you know, I went through this time of, how do I do this? And it really shook my relationship with God, because I realized, you know, they always tell you, you know, you kind of view God how your dad was or something, you know, so you kind of have to wrestle with that. But I had to wrestle through, how did I really view my dad, and how do I view God? And it really allowed me the time to really surrender to God and learn to really feel his love and his presence in my life. Because you live this life with people around you, your family or whatever, but when they're not there anymore, where do you get your security? And I had to really learn that, you know, God had to be my security through it. God had to be my rock, because it's the only thing that made sense. You know, I had been able to pick up the phone and just talk to my dad about random things. I am the youngest of 7 boys and 1 sister. So it was kind of having a big family, you can kind of imagine, but having a big family is not always the greatest. So my dad was that rock. And not being able to pick up the phone and just hear his voice and ask him random questions, I was kind of lost. I was like, who do I ask these questions to now? How do I figure out how to change my tire? I mean, it's just random weird things. And so it really is about trusting God. And I've really had to, I think, dig deep. For those who have known me, you know, that know me here, I've had to really dig deep in my walk with God to really find his strength at times. You know, sometimes my daily thing was, how do you feel today? You know, this is a daily battle, and we can use it sometimes as a catchphrase. But it really is sometimes when you're in the middle of the hardest times of your life. Sometimes it's just a matter of, today I feel. And I don't know how many times I said that, and it was like, okay, today I feel okay. And I wrestled with guilt on the days that I felt happy. It was hard to go, okay, my dad just died, and how can I feel happy? The scripture that says, be joyful, always pray continually, give thanks in all situations. It's kind of like, you kind of go, well, how do I do that? And I remember asking people, well, how do I do that when I'm crying? How am I joyful when I'm crying? Right. And, sometimes it's just being practical. It's, as I call it, self-talk. You got to know yourself well enough. Right. You got to be able to say, okay, I recognize that today I'm emotional. Today I'm not in my right mind. I said that many times. I know I'm not thinking clearly. I know that if that person says anything to me, I'm going to bite their head off. I know I carried a keychain around that I'd stick in my mouth. I learned catchphrases like, stupid is as stupid does. Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. Because there were so many things that people said to me during that time that I was like, what? And you can't get, and I realized just people don't know. People are very good-hearted. They love you, but they don't know. They don't walk in your shoes. And that's okay. You have to be able to tell people that's okay. And you have to be able to be gracious with people because they don't know. But also be vulnerable with people because they need to learn. They need to learn your battles. They need to learn. You're going to be the teacher. And I tell you, I hate that. I hate being the teacher. I wish that everybody, I don't wish that everybody goes through it, but I wish that people had felt things so they understood. Because the hardest thing is learning yourself and being the teacher.
That's right.
So.
Amen. Amen. Appreciate that. So when we suffer, it's a potential wedge between us and God, or it's a potential bond between us and God if pilgrims trust God, and if we believe that we really are pilgrims. You have never suffered outside the potential glory of God and your own good. And yet when we suffer, we feel like something has gone wrong. My life has derailed. My life's not on track. What is going on? This is not the way my life was supposed to go, and yet you are exactly within the will and power of God. And I feel like that's something that's really, really challenging for me. And I totally agree with Christie. People mean well, but they don't get it, right? I mean, I'd be sitting there in church crying. We had 2 spots where my kids used to sit. And Carol and I'd be sitting there, we both would cry. And we'd look at these empty spots. And I'd have to preach sometimes. It's like, oh, I just do not want to get up there. But I'd get up there and I'd pull something together. But I kept looking at those empty spots. And I'd have people with faithful children come up to me and go, oh, they'll be okay. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And they would just give me pat answers and say stupid stuff. And I'd try to be nice, and put my keychain in my mouth. I mean, I handled it differently, but I get exactly what you're saying. You have to really be gracious when you're suffering toward other people. And I had a choice to make between I cling to God or it's a wedge between me and God. And so as we had to kick our children out of the house. We said, well, if you're living this lifestyle, you can't live with us anymore. So you need to go. And I'm not going to give you money, and I'm not going to give you shelter, and you have to go. You have to leave our house. So we had to kick the kids out. I was okay with it. My wife had a harder time. They got a place right down the street, an apartment 1.5 miles from our house. I called it the Den of Iniquity. And I told the kids, when I would pick them up for things, I would say, well, I'll be outside. I don't go inside the den of iniquity. And we would joke. We still were each other's favorite people, even when they turned their backs on God and us. We were still each other's favorite people. And we would have these family dinners. And we would allow them to come in the house for dinner. And we'd have this dinner, and they would just sit there and be like, they'd walk in the house and just smell it. And they'd look at each other like, do you remember what life was like when we lived here? Like, Mom's cooking, Oh, I look around, there's nothing on the floor. And the beds are all made. And the dishes are clean. And mom and dad are nice to each other. And they would just sort of bask in the memories of their kingdom childhood. And I'd be like, that's right. It's a little different than the den of iniquity, you know. And after 3.5 years, Paige, my older daughter, started coming back to church. And she would sit next to us at church. And the first note of the first song, she'd start crying. We're all emotional in my house. It's crazy. And except the dog. He's a dude. But all the rest of us. And so the first note of the first song, Paige starts crying. And she cries through the whole thing. I mean, it was embarrassing. And it was distracting. And she's not a quiet crier. You know, some people just like... But she's like, ooh, you know, I'm like, really? You got to do that the whole time? And she'd cry through the whole thing. And then she'd leave. I'm like, I don't even know if she got anything out of it, but she was there crying. And then we go out to lunch afterward. And we talk about it. And then my younger daughter started feeling left out. Like, you had lunch with mom and dad again, didn't you? She's like, well, I'm not ready to go back to that church, you know. And we all be like, whatever, you know, go do your thing. But we got to a place where we were surrendered. Like, I can no longer script my life. I have these adult children who have gone in a completely different direction. And I have to just do my thing with God. And I got totally surrendered. And so Paige is coming and she's crying through church. But after a while, her younger sister, Chandler, started, like I said, she started feeling left out. And she got kind of jealous of us, more of the lunch than I think it was really the church service. But so she would quiz Paige at the end. She'd go, who led the singing? Who preached? What was it like? Did you see so-and-so? Did you see so-and-so? And she'd go through the list of all of her friends that she grew up with. And did Danny Figgins lead singing? Oh, I love Danny Figgins. And did Dad preach? Oh, what did he preach about? And she was just longing for the foundational of the life that she grew up in. So then she starts coming. She wasn't crying. Paige was crying. She was more like, you know. And but then she asked one of her old mentors, disciplers, to study the Bible with her again. And this is 1.5 years ago. And Paige was like, are you studying the Bible? Wait a minute. I came here first, and now you're studying the Bible? And she's like, yeah, I'm studying the Bible, you know. And so Paige got kind of mad and stopped coming to church. She's like, has to be all about you, doesn't it? You know, to her younger sister. So Chandler, my younger daughter, studies the Bible and comes to the conclusion she never became a Christian. And my mom and dad are watching all of this. Like, we were the perfect family. I mean, I really thought that. I was so proud. I thought, you know, we got this thing figured out. We're the perfect family. The people in the church need to follow us and imitate us. And people in the world don't have a clue. And then my kids, you know, went off the deep end. And everybody felt bad for me. Even my neighbors felt bad for me. Like, oh, I saw Paige. I'm like, I know. I mean, it's really, you know, you're in a bad spot when your non-Christian neighbors who are totally jacked up are feeling like they're looking at me like, oh. I'm like, I mean, this is like an all-time low, you know? And, but anyway, Paige stopped coming, Chandler studied the Bible, and she got baptized last year. That was awesome. Her older sister came to church for her baptism, but had been out most of the night partying. And so we have these pictures of our baptism. You know, there's like Chandler's beaming and Paige is like. And my mom came out for her baptism. So my mom and dad, who have never been believers, but have really come to appreciate the church family. And so my mom asked, how do you come to faith? And I said, well, you got to read your Bible. Remember that Bible I gave you 29 years ago? Dust it off and read it. So 1 year ago, my mom starts reading the Bible every day. She starts listening to sermons online. She lives 1.5 hours from the nearest church. She starts listening to sermons online. And then we had a family reunion at my parents' 50th anniversary, and my mom announced to everyone, I believe in God. I'm going to become a disciple and get baptized in Jay's church. And I was like, woo! after my younger daughter got baptized, my older daughter started studying the Bible again. So that we went from this like 3.5-year period of darkness to I got a saved kid and one on the way. So then, so Paige started studying the Bible again, and then Paige got baptized, right? Now my mom is studying the Bible, and she's in Orlando, an hour and a half from Orlando. So she announces she wants to become a Christian, and I called up some Dennis and Lorna, some old friends of ours who are in Orlando, and I'm like, my mom is 73 years old, right? She says she's going to become a disciple, but I don't really believe it. She lives an hour and a half from the church, and I don't know what to do. Dennis and Lorna are like, oh, we know Tina, because we've all known each other for years and years. So Dennis says, we're planting a church in your mom's hometown, and there's already a group of disciples that have moved on her street, right? They literally have Bible talk on her street, an hour and a half outside of what I thought was the nearest church. And Dennis goes, and all of us on staff and the deacons of the Orlando church, we take turns preaching there. Guess who's preaching on Sunday, he says? Me. He said, I know your mom and dad. Tell them to come, and I'll take them out to lunch after church. So that next Sunday, my mom goes down the street to church, meets Dennis and Lorna, has lunch with them, starts studying the Bible, and then my mom got baptized, right? So I'm in a place where, my favorite hero in the Bible is Joseph. There's many, I know. It's Isaiah, Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. Genesis 37, the favorite son. And I just want to look at his life for just a moment, and then I'm going to turn this back over to Christie. Some smarty pants knows their Bible says, which one? I'm the preacher here. We'll get to it. Taking correction from who? I don't know his last name, do you? Genesis 37, verse 3. Now Israel, also Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. I look at Joseph, and I feel like it's the story of being a young Christian. He showed up, and life was just perfect. My dad likes me more than he likes anybody else, and I got dreams of glory, literally. Like, everybody bows down to me in my dreams. It's awesome. But his brothers hated him, and they sinned against him, and they betrayed him. And their first sin against him was not selling him into slavery, right? They couldn't speak a kind word to him. So it doesn't, these are people of God. And yet they're abusing one another, eventually selling him into slavery. Then he's accused of being a rapist. I'm skipping way ahead. There were a lot of bad things that happened in between being accused of rape that he didn't do. Then he's thrown in jail, right? He's moved around in different jails. He gets elevated, he gets humbled, he gets elevated, he gets humbled. The cupbearer forgets to mention him for 2 years. He's rotting in jail because of someone's forgetfulness. Now, things like this happen to us, and we go, where the heck is God? Can I trust him? And we ask ourselves these questions. If God's a loving God, then why do things like this happen to me? But God had a master plan. And it's so hard for us to trust. And I really want to encourage you got to read this book. My mom, who is actually a real Christian, and I've checked. I asked the woman who studied with her, I'm like, was she really open? Because she got some serious sin, right? And I asked my mom that too. I'm like, Mom, were you really open? Because my mom was crazy. My mom and dad are crazy. And my dad's going to church now every Sunday, right? My dad. You don't know my dad? Well, a couple of you do. It's like the last person on earth to go to church. And my mom said after she got baptized, she said, I'm never going to invite your dad to church. I was like, really? You think that's a good idea? She's like, never. I'm not going to invite him. She goes, because I know him. And if I start bugging him to come to church, he'll never come. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to church. See you later, honey. So she did that. And he's like, well, where is it? She's like, oh, I don't know. Don't worry about it. No, really? When's it over? How long is it? He starts asking questions. And so then she says, well, you can come if you want. So he comes every Sunday now. My mom recently overheard him on the phone with his fishing buddy on a Saturday. Let's go fishing tomorrow. Oh, I wish I could. But, Teeny drags me to this church every... He's lying to cover up because it doesn't feel like it's macho to go to church, but he loves it secretly. So he's next. I'll keep you posted. So my mom, who's a real Christian, she shares her faith, has her quiet times, the whole thing. She sends me this book, Trusting God Even When Life Hurts. Write that down. Who's read this book? Raise your hand. See what I'm saying? All right. This book, Trusting God Even When Life Hurts, Jerry Bridges. My mom sent it to me and says, she sent me the workbook too. She's like, you're messed up and you got to read this book. And she was right, and I am. And so I recommend it highly for all of you. And it's basically, it goes through the story of Joseph's life in a way that helps you to imitate his spirit of trust in God.
So I just want to share about trusting God and how my life has been the last 2 years. 2 years ago in June, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And what a whirlwind. So it was so fast and furious. It was a Friday when I had my MRI. I'd been suffering from severe headaches. That's what took me in. So I get a phone call from my doctor right after, about less than an hour after my MRI. And she's like, we're going to admit you to the hospital tonight. Okay. I'm like, and I had a running joke with her when I went to her office. I said, it's not a brain tumor. And she goes, we don't know. So when she called me, I said, well, it's not a brain tumor. She said, we don't know. She said, but we need to get you into the hospital. So, your life is geared in one direction, and you can get thrown really quickly. So I got admitted that Friday night, and then Saturday, they had no idea. Monday morning at 7:30, I was in the in the operating room having brain surgery. I was not, they had no idea. My neurosurgeon was like, we have no idea. We don't know how aggressive it is. We don't know what it is. We just have to get in there and see. And they call it a brain biopsy, but it's really brain surgery. And so that weekend was a whirlwind, and all I could tell you is I was really numb because all I could do was get through it. But I was very grateful for the relationships that I have. They finally had to kick me out of my hospital room down to the cafeteria because there were so many people that came through the hospital that weekend. They called my room the party room. And so there were so many people that we were disturbing the other patients. So they sent me down to the cafeteria where I could at least fellowship with people. I couldn't tell you who was all there, but and then the night before my surgery, I had to sit down and do my last rites, which, at 41 years old at that time, that's a scary place to be. When you're not thinking clearly, but I remember things like, you all heard Wade last night. Wade was the one I was talking to about it. And I said, he's like, well, what do you want to do with your stuff? I'm like, Wade, it's stuff. At this point, it doesn't matter. There were a few things that, I had kind of written some things out, but I was not prepared to die. My best friend flew in from Massachusetts. Wasn't expecting her because we had talked on the phone and she's like, do you need me there? And I said, let's wait until, she was coming 2 weeks later. I said, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And she walked in with her family. Her brother and her sister-in-law brought her. And, you know, relationships are key.
Yep.
And she spent the night with me at the hospital, and she was there that morning with me as I prepared for surgery. And we had prayed for me to be able to, my 3 prayers at that point was to hear somebody, to see somebody, and well, actually it was 2 prayers because it was those 2 things. That it was to be able to hear someone's voice, and I hear my neurosurgeon waking me up. And then to be able to see everybody. I wasn't concerned about how I was doing. I was more concerned to see everybody. I wanted to see, there was about, I don't know, 15, 20 people waiting that day in the recovery. And I was just waiting to see people. And they had me in the ICU for 24 hours. So the ironic thing, they never could figure out what it was. They were able to get it all. There's a couple that's in the church here in Denver that kind of, as I call, they just took charge of everything. And I was so grateful for that because my family was a mess. I'm the baby of the family and nobody knew what to do because they were so used to me being the stable one. And so they let me, you know, they just didn't know what to do. And I'm just grateful for the Klauses and their daughter's here right now, who stepped up and just really took charge of everything. I would have never thought to check on the doctor, to ask, has he had any cases against him? I would have never thought any of that. And of course, I'm not in my right mind to think through anything. So this became a brand new journey. A couple days later, they came back and said it wasn't cancer. Thank God. That was our prayer. We had prayed that it wasn't, that it wouldn't be cancer or it'd be benign. Well, it came back as not cancer, but we never prayed that God would answer what it was. So then I started this series of, they thought it was an infection on the brain. And so they sent me home with a PICC line, had to do my own antibiotics every day. 3 weeks later, I broke out in a 103 temperature, ended up back in the ER, ended up back in the hospital for another 9 days, so that was 11 days, 9 days. And, you know, all through this time, you know, I felt very confident that God was in control. My prayer was for the miracles of people that would become Christians because of this. And the hard part about it, you know, as Jay was talking about his family, I have physically not seen those people, what God's done, but I know in heaven I'll see them. It gave me great vision for the medical ministry of what God could do here with as many doctors and things that I've done. So in that journey, then what started happening when I went back in, they found these lesions popping up on my brain. So I went through all these tests. I don't know how many MRIs I've had on my brain. If you want to see a brain, I can show you. I can tell you what it looks like. I can tell you what a spinal tap feels like. I can tell you all these different things. And, you know, people ask me, and, you know, there's a point at which I just said, I have to trust the knowledge of which God has instilled in people who may not even be Christians. He gave people the ability to be doctors. And I had to trust that if God wanted them to know what was going on, I even told my neurosurgeon that. He's like, you're my complicated patient. I said, I'm making you work for your money. And I said, but God knows. I told him that, and he kind of looked at me like, huh? I said, God knows what's going on. And so over the next year, all these things were happening. These lesions would come and go. Every month, they would move from one place in my brain to the other. So they had no idea. So I went through all these tests, and they still didn't know. And then in June of last year, I suffered a stroke. So for me to be standing here with you guys today is a story in and of itself. That's right. Let me tell you the journey it took. I was in my mom's hospital room. My mom had just had day 1 of major surgery, and I was sitting in her room when the stroke happened. So it was, I lost speech. I lost the whole left side function. I lost the ability to walk. And so the journey back has kind of been a journey to be able to learn to think again. I mean, even reading your Bible, you know, I tell people that it's not as easy to me to remember some of the scriptures, but as I start reading or I have to hear things or listen to things, you can find ways to connect with God no matter what. And that's what I had to learn to do. And I had to learn to get rid of the programming, as I call it, in my head, of what you think you should do versus what you just need to do. And I spent much time crying out to God last summer. I had a rotation of people because I couldn't drive for 6 months. So I felt like my whole life was, so my brother that's in the hospital right now, not expected to live, was the brother that took care of me a year ago. And my mom was in the hospital for 5 months. So it was kind of this, you know, my family was like, where do we go? So to say that life is a journey, and for me, the very practical things, that's why I thought spiritually, relationally, and emotionally. Relationally is what got me through it. Spiritually is what kept my foundation, is what kept me from going insane when I had no idea. And emotionally, I laugh with God sometimes because I said, you made me go through this to become a crier. Because I hated crying before this, but now you can't stop, so. So yeah, I just want to share, like we all have a journey, and I tell people, your journey is maybe very different than mine, but it's your journey. And don't compare your journey to me. God knew I could handle this, and God knew I could get through it. And He knew and I have a testimony to give. I have a life to get, or a story to give. And that's what I'm here to do, is give my story.
Okay, so this challenge of trusting God, I mean, it's a lifelong journey, right? And Psalm 84, blessed are those who set their hearts on pilgrimage. And we've skipped around, we've shared different personal challenges that we have faced, and I know that we will all face more, and that is the nature of this life, and that is the nature of being a pilgrim, and it's our responsibility to set our hearts on pilgrimage. Not fighting it, not struggling with it. When our forefathers came to America, you think they expected things to be really easy here? Like, it's going to be great. No. They knew it was going to be really hard. And when hard things happen, it was exactly what they expected. And we, as spiritual pilgrims, have got to get to a place where it's normal to have challenges. We understand that in this life, we will have trouble. Jesus warned us of that. In this life, you will have trouble. And so if we get to a place where in our pilgrimage, we set our hearts on pilgrimage, and we anticipate and expect that we will have to trust God through this. Pilgrims trust God. And if we can get to that place, I want to encourage you to really devote yourselves to studying this out in the Bible. It's extraordinary, the call to trust. And in fact, I'd like you to say it with me. Pilgrims trust God. You ready? Pilgrims trust God. We have a couple more minutes. We have a 20-minute break. The next class session starts at 11:20. And we just have a couple of minutes. And we had said we would have a little bit of Q&A. And so if there are a couple of you, any of you who have something, we may or may not have an answer for you, but feel free to stand up and ask if you have a question. And afterward, we'll be available too. Yes? You have to stand up.
Thank you for what you shared. I'm sorry, I'm going through the exact same thing as you. I have an 18-year-old daughter I had to ask to leave my house.
Okay, Cecilia has an 18-year-old daughter who she had to ask to leave her house. So
I'm single. I didn't want to miss the boat on the family, and because I'm already 51, so
Yeah.
I went through the process of adoption.
she adopted as a single sister.
And it's hard. She shows up sometimes at church when I'm in Kids Kingdom. People come up to me, do you know her hair's blue? I know you didn't let her do that. And I'm like, she's not with me anymore. what do you do now? Like, I did what you did. She's come over, she's joined the church for a concert here and there, and then I don't see her for 3 weeks. But then, like, this morning there's a text, Mom, I miss you. Like, it's hard. I struggle with, I want to embrace her and tell her you don't know what's out there and I do to trust me, but I know I need to trust God and let her go. So how did you find, what did you do? What were practicals that you did to find
How do you fix your kids when they fall away? It's really easy. Thank you, Cecilia. Cecilia was in our ministry a long time ago. So go to our church website. This is so interesting you asked that question. My wife and I spoke at a Northwest Christian conference, and we were given the task of responding to wandering children. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, I'm not ready. I'm still too raw. Both my kids are faithful disciples now, thank you, Jesus, after 3.5 years of scariness. But so I asked the girls, do you feel comfortable with Mom and I teaching a class on responding to wandering children, which was you? And they're like, yeah, tell them whatever you want. It's all right, whatever, you know. And I said, actually, would you write the class for us? And so they each did 5 points on what parents should do when their kids fall away. And so it's recorded and it's on our church website, seattlechurchofchrist.org. And the kids wrote and it was only 20 minutes, so we only had 2 minutes per point. But the kids made a brilliant class on what to do and what not to do when your kids fall away. And they basically taught the class for us. So, seattlechurchofchrist.org. And under Northwest Christian Conference, there's all of our lessons there, and Carol and I basically taught our kids lesson on what to do when they fall away. So, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I think the biggest thing that I learned is the people that you think are going to be there are not always the ones that are there. But God provides the ones that need to be there for you in the moment.
Yeah.
So just keep praying for those. Pray for those miracles of people that He wants in your life. And if you open your eyes, you'll see magnificent people come in.
Amen. Appreciate that. Okay, our time's up.